Hey everybody, today I'm talking about Underwater Cities, which is a 2018 release board game by designer Vladimir Suchy. This one is published by Delicious Games, which I believe is Vladimir's own company. Accommodates 1 to 4 players and takes probably around that 2-hour mark to play. The box does say it takes 40 minutes per player, but I would argue that that's a little bit shy of what it actually does play. So the idea of this game is that the Earth is starting to be overpopulated, meaning that the human population has to start building underwater cities to be able to provide and look after them. So the game is going to take place on this main board here and also on your individual player boards, which will look like this. Now this is at the end of a game, so naturally the board state isn't going to quite look like this at the start of the game. This is very much as the game is developed and so on. So fundamentally the game is pretty simply in terms of its mechanics. You have got a bit of worker placement here, you've got some hand management and card play, but the main aspect of the game is your tableau building as you're building up an engine of cards and creating synergies and combinations as you put more and more combinations together. So what you do on your turn, and I should say the game plays out over 10 rounds, at the end of every at the end of the first 4 rounds there's going to be a kind of income kind of phase, and then there's going to be 3 more turns, another income phase, and then the final 3 turns and a final income phase. And at the end of all those turns, the person with the most victory points is going to be the winner. So what are you going to do on your actual turn? So first off, everybody is going to start off with 3 of these different tokens, and you are going to choose to allocate them onto one of these worker placement spots dotted around the map here. So you can see you've got these different colours. You've got the orange ones, you've got the red ones, and you've got the greeny ones here. Forgive me if I'm not quite right because I'm colourblind. But also, whenever you take one of those spots, not only are you going to get the bonus associated with those spots, but you're also going to always have a hand of cards. And if you end up matching the colour of the cards and the worker placement spot, then you are going to get an additional bonus and get different rewards for doing so. Now, generally speaking, these slots here are slightly weaker actions, but have corresponding cards that are slightly more powerful. The red ones here are a bit more kind of well balanced, and the orange ones here are really powerful worker placement spots, but the cards are generally a bit less impactful. So let's talk about what a lot of these slots do. So first off, this one here lets you draw cards, so you've got a bit more flexibility in your hand, lets you upgrade your buildings or gain kelp. Now, your resources that you've got here, you've got science, which lets you upgrade your buildings. You've got kelp, which is used to not only build buildings, but also used to feed your population, because you need to feed them at the end of every income phase. You've got all your different buildings and things represented by these discs. You've got your money, you've got your kind of metal, you've got this kind of, I don't know what it's called in terms of its proper name, but it's like a flexible resource which can be used for food and as metal. You've got your little tunnels here and so on. So yeah, this one's going to be used for upgrading your buildings. This one's going to be used for climbing up this track here. Now this track is useful because it lets you break first player order, so whoever's higher up in this track is not only going to get rewards for going up it, but also going to be first in the next round, which can be quite important. You've got this one here that lets you build buildings, this one here that lets you build these desalination plants, this one here that lets you draw special cards from this deck here, either paying 1 or 2 from this set, or buying or spending 3 coins to get one of these cards, which can give you endgame bonuses. You've got this one here that gets you just resources. This one here that lets you activate your action cards, which I'll explain shortly, or build tunnels. This one here lets you build farms or laboratories. This one here again lets you build buildings and build one of these structures. Upgrade your buildings or gain science, build 2 tunnels, and get any of the combination of those resources. So that's going to be the basic actions. So as you can see, they're pretty straightforward, but when you start combining them with cards, it becomes a little bit more involved. So why are you doing all this? So the reason you're doing this is obviously to get points, and the way you're going to get points is pretty much illustrated by your state of your board here. So every board is going to start off, or every player is going to start off with a board with just a single city on like this, and as you go on, you're going to start building more cities by cashing in resources, building tunnels by, again, caching resources. These structures along the side, if you connect up to these metropolises, you get additional bonuses or potentially endgame bonuses for doing so. And the reason you're doing this is because if you have, or the more cities you have, first off, is you're going to get more points. But if you have a number of different buildings or different building types in each city, you're going to get more points. But sometimes that's not always going to be to your advantage, because you might want to upgrade buildings and have the same couple together because they become a lot more productive for doing so. So for example, if I use my little player sheet here as an aid, so for every kind of farm I use, if it's just a single farm, you're going to produce a kelp, which is useful because it feeds your workers. But if you have the upgraded ones, you get to get a kelp and a point. But if you have two, or if you have a pair of upgraded farms, then you're going to get 3 food and 3 points. So they're a lot more efficient if there are a couple of upgraded buildings together. And the other buildings work in a similar fashion. Again, you can build the basic buildings here, or you can build these very fancy symbiotic buildings, which will give you more points when it comes to the income phase, and so on. So yeah, you want to be constantly building and expanding and becoming more productive as the game goes on. Now let's talk about how the cards actually come into play, because there are so many different things that the cards can do in terms of giving instant abilities, giving permanent abilities, because you've got these ones here with this kind of infinite sign on them, where no matter what you do, these are always going to be active. So for example here, once per turn I could have built a tunnel at a -1 credit discount, or at the end of my turn I can spend 1 credit to convert a kelp into metal, or vice versa. This one here means that if I don't ever match a colour and worker placement spot and a card together, then I get to get a metal and a coin. Or whenever I build a city, I get to go 2 up this track here. So there are a lot of things that combine together and can give you bonuses for no matter what you do. But that's only one aspect of what your tableau can achieve. So you've also got these action cards, which correlate to the certain action spots on the board, like this, where if you use an action space that does that, you can tap one of these abilities or one of these buildings and get a bonus, and these can do some really nice things. You start off with a very basic one like this, which just gets you a metal or a credit, but eventually you can start spending credits to build tunnels, or upgrading one of your laboratories just by spending a credit or a science, and so on. And there are lots of buildings and things you can do. You've got endgame scoring ones as well, like this, which is I've invested in, which means that at the end of the game I'm going to get 2 points for every upgraded lab I have. And you've also got, as I said, instant abilities and so on. So there are a lot of different things you can do and a lot of different routes you can take and focus on. You've also got some public objectives available for all the players, which are kind of a race aspect, where the first person to achieve a certain criteria is going to get a bonus. So in this example here, the first person to build 6 tunnels is going to get 2 points, 1 metal and 2 science. And obviously that creates a bit of a tension between the players and gives you a bit of an incentive to go towards. So that's pretty much how the game's going to play. It's just a matter of keep placing your worker tiles out, and getting resources, upgrading your buildings, using your actions, and building tunnels and building this network up, making sure that you can feed your people, and basically building up an infrastructure where you can sustain yourself. So let's talk about how I actually feel about the game. So first off, mechanically, I think while on the face of it, it's a pretty straightforward worker placement game. These spots are pretty clear and clean. There's not too much fluff or fuss about them. But combined with that hand management, I think works really well, because you do really want to bear in mind about when and where you're going to play these cards and which order you're going to play them in, because not only do you have the choice to do that, but you also have to bear in mind that do you want to play your card first and get the ability, or do you want to take the action from the worker placement spot first? And that can be really important and create some interesting decisions, and sometimes downright brain-racking decisions, because doing things in a certain order is really important to be as efficient as you can. Not only that, there aren't too many worker placement spots, so doing these in the right order and making sure that somebody isn't going to snatch the spot you want before you need to do what you need to do is of the utmost importance. So I really do like that meshing of the hand management and card play with the tableau building and the pure worker placement. It really does come together really nicely. Of course, there's some other kind of standard Euro tropes, the initiative track, the public objectives. You've got some Really nice cards here that you can invest in, which give you a bit more of a kick and give you a bit more bang for your buck. But bearing in mind that, money is a tight resource and you have to bear that in mind at all times. So yeah, there's some really cool decisions here, and trying to play everything as efficiently as you can and get that motor running as early and as efficiently as you can. It's just so satisfying when it does pay off. So I really do like the fact that there are a lot of routes you can do, loads of engines you can cater towards, and end game goals that you can try and tailor yourself to achieve at the end of the game, and so on. So that's all really nice. The balance of the game as well, it goes hand in hand with that, really. Your engine really does you can tailor make your engine to do what you want it to do. Do you want to have a real productive system where you can keep getting your buildings out? Do you want to give yourself lots of passive abilities so that you can just generally be, or just have the edge over your opponents as you go through the game, and so on? So there are loads of different routes you can do. All the cards are well balanced, and I love the fact that if you want to play the more powerful cards, then you're going to have to go to the weaker spots, and that works really well. The mechanically, again, clean, simple and crisp, and in terms of rules overhead, there really isn't much. It's pretty clean worker placement, but all the depth lies in the cards, and I really do like that. So in terms of having to communicate the rules to someone, it's very straightforward, but they can really kind of sink their teeth into it as they actually see the cards develop throughout the game and start to see the different strategies formulate without having to explain it all beforehand, which is really nice. The time investment, while 10 rounds seems quite long, and it is slightly on that higher end of those, or of my sweet spot of Euro games, I never felt that this one outstayed its welcome. I think it's a really satisfying puzzle, lots of things to try and explore, and you're always engaged. There's never a point where you think, this is going on too long, despite it being quite a long game. So I think long games and games that outstay their welcome are very different things. And as long as I'm engaged from start to finish, then I'm happy with the game being on that longer end of the time spectrum. And I think Underwater Cities falls under that category, really. The replayability is excellent in this game, not only because of all the different engines you can build. You've got all the different endgame cards here that can come out, and these aren't in every game, so there's a bit of variability there. You're not going to see all these special cards each game. Whenever it comes to a scoring phase, you're going to have to change the deck of cards. So you've got your Era 3 cards here, you've got your Era 2 cards, your Era 1 cards. So there's a loads of replayability, and you're never going to see the same cards in every single game. And so that's always good. You're always seeing new things and new combinations, and I love that. The interaction, there's a lot of things I usually say about worker placement games, about these spots being scarce. I really do feel like you need that in a worker placement game, and Underwater Cities does a great job of that. These worker placement spots are really valuable. You do have to weigh up what you're going to prioritise and bear in mind what your opponents are going to take, because that they are really scarce, and doing it in order is going to be important, and always prioritising is great. The public objectives as well add a race element and a bit of a tension in the game, and also these powerful cards at the end as well, that you always want to make sure that you're getting there before your opponents do, to make sure you're getting as many points as you possibly can. So I do like that terms of player interaction. The aesthetics of the game is something I'm not overly keen on. I think the game has some issues in terms of the art. It's not for me personally. I think all the artwork looks a bit soulless and just doesn't look quite, I don't know, it just doesn't look quite right to me. It almost has a underdeveloped feel, which is a bit of a shame. But that being said, this kind of theme doesn't quite do it for me either. But I understand the route they're going for in terms of a different approach. These Underwater Cities is not a overly used theme. In fact, it's not used at all. Whereas if this was probably a medieval theme of having, knights and building castles and things, I'll probably be a lot more keen for it. But that being said, it's not something I dislike. It's just not something I am particularly invested in either. So in terms of the actual components themselves, it does have a bit of a cheap feel to it. And I don't know if I have a better way to say it than that. The cards are okay, but all these different building parts, which I've just knocked my board over, these all just feel a little bit tacky, really. They're quite light, and just feel like they've cut some production corners. So these are just basic standard discs. All these different tunnels, they're a bit small and a bit thin. All the tokens don't look great. They're functional, but they could have been improved considering this isn't a cheap game, and it could have been a little bit more deluxeified considering the price. But you do get a lot in the box. There's loads of cards, loads of components. So in that respect, I suppose I can't complain too much. The setup and teardown time is not too much of an issue, really. Of course, you've got all the different components you need to lay out on the table, the different card stacks and things like that. But I think most of the kind of playing things on the table and things happens during the game. So it kind of, maybe the pack-up time is a bit more than the setup time. But it's not too much of an issue, and I certainly don't see it as an obstacle to get this one to the table. And in sense of progression, I think this is one of the best examples of a game ramping up as you go on throughout it. So, for example, in turn 1, you've got very basic, just placing your workers out, putting some initial cards out. But by the time you get to, after the second production phase, you've really got loads of cards down, as I've got here, which all are working at the same time, and you really do have that ramping up effect and feel like you're achieving way more than you was at the beginning of the game. Just remembering all the different things you can do, taking different routes than your opponents can. There's a lot of lots of progression here, and it really does ramp up incredibly well and leaves you having really satisfying turns which combo together well and things like that. Scalability as well. I would hesitate to play this one probably more than 2 players, to be honest. I would play with 3 players under the right circumstances, but I think 4 players is not something I'll be looking at doing. It actually works incredibly well as a solo game as well, because not only is the solo automa really simple in terms of just blocking a few spots, and you can actually foresee the spots that they're doing, so you can plan that accordingly, but it's just a matter of trying to beat your high score really and exceed 100 points and building 7 cities. But although that sounds pretty boring on the face of it, it actually works really well, because not only do you get to play the game a lot quicker, you can really just get your head down and focus on your own engine, and it's still you get the full kind of feel of the game without having to worry about what other people are doing. But as I said, at 2 players as well, it works equally as well. And I think that's my sweet spot for this one. Comparisons, there are a lot of worker placement games out there. And in the face of it, these spots aren't incredibly interesting. But as I said, matched or meshed with that card play just takes us way beyond a lot of the worker placement games out there. And I really do like the way that those 2 simple things do come together, and added with the engine building and the tableau building and all those kind of crunchy bits, just comes together extremely well and takes it into the kind of next bracket of satisfying gameplay. That pretty much concludes my thoughts, at least in the gameplay of Underwater Cities. So let's just go into some of my final thoughts. So first off, I wasn't quite sure what to expect about this one, because although I really enjoyed Praga Caput Regni, which really did kind of whet my appetite for Vladimir Suchy games, and I absolutely loved that game. It had the kind of theme I like, it had a lot of mechanisms I like. This one, I don't know what it was that stopped me getting this to the table a lot quicker than it did, because I know it was so highly praised. I think it might have been the aesthetics, because I generally don't like this almost pandemic look. It's a bit too shiny for me, and a bit too bright and garish. But that being said, I completely ignore that when I'm playing the game, because the gameplay is so strong, so satisfying and engaging, that I was left massively impressed with this one. I really do love the engine building, one of the best examples of an engine building game I've played, and I've played a lot of them as well. So many different cards that can do different things, loads of combinations. You're never going to play the same game twice. There's a good amount of player interaction without it being overburdening. Turns are engaging. It's just absolutely fantastic. One of the best kind of card management games and engine building games that I've ever played. Absolutely fantastic. I would have liked it to be a better theme or a different theme, but that's my personal tastes, and I appreciate that they've gone for something a bit different. But hey, I don't mind. I'll happily play this one anytime, because it is so much fun. So that pretty much concludes my thoughts on Underwater Cities. It is definitely as good as they say it is. It's got everything you want, really. So if you enjoy these kind of ramping up games where you like to have your own little thing going, this is definitely one to check out. And if you're looking for a solo game with that kind of gameplay, then I would definitely recommend giving Underwater Cities a go. This one is strong enough to get my elite seal, which I rarely give out. I was that impressed with Underwater Cities. And that pretty much concludes my thoughts. Highest praise for this one, and I'm really looking forward to digging in deeper to more Vladimir Suchy games, and certainly I will be checking out anything he brings out in the future. So I hope you've enjoyed this review. If you have, please hit like and subscribe to my channel, and check out my other videos too. For everyone else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye.